Hi everyone, my name's Kevin Byrne. I'm Consul General here at the Irish Consulate in Chicago. You're all very welcome to this evening's event, Shaping a Fairer World, the Legacy of Mother Jones. Just a few little housekeeping pieces before we kick off with the event proper. This event is being recorded, so just so you're aware of that. If there's any bit you find particularly interesting, you can watch it back later. Or if your friends that might want to watch it, it'll be up on our YouTube page in a couple of days, so we'll be sharing that out. One of the benefits, very few benefits of doing events online in this strange COVID world is that we get people from all over. It's always really interesting to see where people are listening in from. So it'd be great if you could, I see Meg has already started, it'd be great if you could just pop in the chat where you are tuning in from. It's always interesting to see where folks are coming in from. And we'd also be really interested to find out how you found out about the event. Was it through our newsletter or Twitter or through a friend? So please feel free to pop where you're from in there. We'll see just how far the reach has gotten for Mother Jones. I know it's particularly far, so I imagine we'll have folks from all over. As well, we're going to have a chance for Q&A at the end of the event. We'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A. Feel free to pop your questions either in the dedicated Q&A box, or if you prefer, you can just pop them in the chat. We have the team here at the consulate pulling out those questions. So towards the end, I'll get a chance to present your question to our panelists and to our speakers. This is the fourth event in our Design Month series. It's all predicated on St. Bridget and St. Bridget's Day. Every year, Irish consulates and embassies right around the world celebrate St. Bridget's Day with events looking at the creativity and the contribution of Irish women and Irish women in the diaspora. We felt that there was too much for just one day, so we've done an entire series. And really for us, we found it that it's been a great to learn about the contribution of women in various aspects of design. Our first event was with Marty Fahey, and we looked at 150 years of women in Irish design and art. You can find that's available on our YouTube channel if you want to look back and watch that. Our second event was with the Design and Crafts Council and two really exciting young designers. We had a moderator, Nora Gaynor from the Art Institute, and that really explored the contribution of women to Irish design today, and I suppose shaping that future of Irish design. Our third event was with the Chicago Architecture Centre, and that was with Grafton Architects, so the Pritzker Prize winning Grafton Architects in Dublin, and really that looked at the contribution of Shelley McNamara and Yvonne Farrell to the world of architecture, and really it has been a phenomenal contribution. And then that brings us today, looking at the legacy of Mother Jones and how she shaped a fairer world. We're really excited to have some great speakers here today. Our first speaker is Rosemary Feurer. For anyone that knows Mother Jones, you'll know Rosemary and her work. I'll introduce Rosemary. Rosemary will speak, and then she'll introduce a special guest, and then it'll come back to me, and I'll introduce Lindsay Hand, who is an artist and is doing something really exciting with us here at the consulate. But without further ado, Rosemary Feurer is a labour historian and associate professor at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois. She's published books, essays, documentaries, and public history resources on labour history. Among these resources is the website motherjonesmuseum.org. Her short biopic documentary, Mother Jones, America's Most Dangerous Woman, completed in 2007, has been viewed by over 100,000 people in the US and assisted the Cork Spirit of Mother Jones Festival in reviving knowledge of Mary Harris Jones in the city of her birth. She's working on a new biography of Mary Harris Jones, and she's director of the Mother Jones Heritage Project, which is currently engaged in a campaign to place a statue of Mother Jones at a prominent location in Chicago, and that has support from the Irish Immigrant Support grant funding from the Irish government. So Rosemary, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you to tell us some more about Mother Jones.
Thank you, Kevin. We really appreciate your invitation to have us on this program. And I mean that because everybody here who is on this program is associated with a campaign to bring Mother Jones into more prominent view in the United States, and the consulate support of our statue has been so important. Mother Jones lived through trauma and tragedy, through unspeakable loss, yet she emerged from these devastating blows to become the iconic mother of the working class. She used this role to urge workers, men and women, to get off your knees and stake your claim for social justice. She was called the most dangerous woman in America as a result, because those who opposed her grew to see the power of her channeling, not only of the pain, but the possibilities of history. So I'm going to focus on a short background history, assuming even if you are a big fan and you already think you know everything about her, but I'm going to place her in context. And then we're delighted to have Bridget Duffy performing as Mother Jones. I'll introduce her at that point, but she is a member of the Statue Committee. From there, we will witness her legacy directly by showing a short video of women who are directly interpreting her legacy. And I'll come back to talk about how she has been revived in recent years from Cork to Chicago and beyond. And I will talk about our effort for the Chicago Mother Jones statue campaign. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. Okay. I was born in the city of Cork, Ireland. My people were poor. For a generation, they fought for Ireland's freedom. With that, Mother Jones opens her autobiography. From Mary, witnessing the famine from Cork, a market city, must have been an excruciating awakening. Born in 1837, at the age of 10, she witnessed the worst year of the Great Famine and did not know if all would die. Mary would have seen starved corpses. This, by the way, is the street near where we think she lived at the time, both in artistic rendering and modern day. And you see the bells of Shandon in Cork in the background there. Mary would have seen starved corpses carted off while food that would have prevented starvation was taken to the ports of the River Lee for export. Mary's father emigrated on the coffin ships in 1847. Mary and the rest of the family followed in the early 50s. They were poor refugees, escaping but also remembering. They settled in the Irish community in Toronto. There, she watched debates on in the Ontario Parliament and became known as an excellent debater in her own school. She looked like she was on the path to a teaching job. She took one in Monroe, Michigan in 1858, but then took off for Memphis in 1860. Sorry, that is a image of a workhouse in Cork. The other picture isn't showing up, but that was the fate of so many people in Cork. In Memphis, she left for Memphis from Monroe, Michigan after this short teaching job. And there she met and married George Jones, a Welsh iron molder and an organizer for the Molders Union. By 1867, they had 4 children already. They lived in the Irish section of Memphis called Pinchgut. And you see it here. It is in an area of the Bayou Gausa that was often an open cesspool. Pinchgut, as you can imagine, is a poor area. Her husband, though, was working as an iron molder at the time, and he was organizing. And she said that he taught her how to read statistics and to look at information so that you could understand how the world really worked. But then in 1867, yellow fever, an epidemic viral disease transmitted by mosquitoes that bred in that hollow, came with excruciating results. Her autobiography speaks of this in brief but disturbing short sentences. One by one, my 4 little children sickened and died. I washed their little bodies and got them ready for burial. My husband caught the fever and died. I sat alone through nights of grief. No one came, no one could. Mary moved to Chicago and opened a dressmaking business on Washington Street. She saw old world power imbalances in this new world of wealth and capital. Often while sewing for the lords and barons who lived in magnificent houses on the Lakeshore Drive of Chicago, I would look out of the plate glass windows and see the poor, shivering wretches, jobless and hungry, walking along the frozen lakefront. But then another disaster. In October 1871, the Great Chicago Fire burned up our establishment and everything we had. The fire made thousands of homeless. We stayed all night and next day without food on the lakefront, often going into the lake to keep cool. She took refuge with other poor homeless people in Old St. Mary's Church at Washington and Peck, near where the consulate is in the present. Years later, she said that seeing so much suffering sparked her search for solutions. I first began to think of the labor cause after the Great Fire of Chicago, when I saw all the relief which had been sent to the distressed did not reach the source for which it was meant. Then I began to read and think of some plan to relieve the suffering, which I saw everywhere about me. Here, in the midst of this cataclysm of suffering, there was a movement of resistance. Here's more people on the waterfront just trying to, survive in that time. Here's an image of the devastated city after the fire. Chicago, she saw, built a movement of resistance. She saw it for herself. It was an immigrant hotbed in the 1870s and 1880s. And by the 1890s, Jones joined the socialist movement. She later said the system she observed was one based on brute force, and the socialist system aimed to turn it into a civilization based on justice and love. To that end, she said, I am doing all I can. By the time of the 1894 unemployed movement, she was known as Mother Jones. She did seek to organize women into this movement, but the showdown between the United Mine Workers and the coal operators was on in a call for a strike in 1897. And this image from a newspaper is the first one. And this arrow is unfortunately a little off there. Is her speaking before this crowd, and the arrow, I apologize, is over her head. But she said it was noted that women came to the fore in this meeting, and she became a United Mine Workers organizer sometime after this. She was a phenomenal organizer, and I think a lot of the previous biographies miss that. It wasn't that she just made speeches. She initiated a house-to-house canvass among and by women to draw entire families and allies into this movement. She initiated not only house-to-house campaign, but she said women should run that campaign. She advised women to organize independently of the men, to, as she said, shorten your skirts and march. In defiance of an injunction that had prevented them from marching from mine to mine in order to shut them down. She asked them to defy their husbands too, and their fathers if necessary, to deny them access to the home if they crossed the picket line. Women had long been a part of coalfield strikes and marches, but usually on the margins. What Jones was doing here was creating an organizational style that reflected her socialist claims to create a future society based on solidarity and cooperation. She wanted organizing to reflect that suggestion of solidarity. She wanted to organize Black and white, men and women, immigrants and native born, and to remove the barriers that were significant, the barriers of division that divided the entire labor movement. In the course of this campaign, these strategies led her to call to fill the jails in defiance of the injunction, something that we associate with the civil rights movement of the mid-20th century. The 1897 strike really put up a lot of these sorts of strategies in a major way for the first time. It was the major campaign success for the miners, and she had played a major role. By 1900, she was a star, a lightning, a lightning rod in the movement. And the United Mine Workers, all male leadership, sent her into the most dangerous territory for miners, the state she called medieval West Virginia. Brute and legal force greeted her. There she defied an injunction, wading in water up to her waist in streams, and because the mine owners and their minions barred her from even walking the roads. Her courage astonished the miners. Rounded up for violating a judge's order, the prosecutor called her the most dangerous woman in America. The judge called her a vampire, an improper lady, and demanded that she leave. She replied in so many words, "I'll be back." And she did come back. Reporters asked her then and now, and at the end of her life, where did this rebellious tenacity come from? Sometimes she was very brief, responding with droll Irish twist. The rebellious blood of her ancestors must linger in her veins, in my veins, she said, or my Irish spirit has the fight in it. To workers, she said, I belong to a class that has been robbed, plundered, murdered, maligned, vilified, jailed, persecuted all down the ages. And because I belong to that class, I feel it is my duty to awaken that class to their condition. Here, I think, you realize that Mother Jones' power came from feeling that she was part of a long rebel tradition, of a deeper calling from a wider global community. Yes, the Irish, but from wider traditions of struggle, and that she was calling others to be part of that tradition. I was born in revolution, she said at another point. She combined a variety of movements in her list of inspirations. She carried abolitionist writings in her purse, combining all these movements and drawing in them for organizing strategies. Sit down and read, she said. Prepare yourself for the coming struggle. And unlike some depictions, she really did read. She read widely, and it really stirred her soul and made it possible for her to think about how to build a movement. When asked where she lived, she responded, all over this country, wherever there is a good fight against wrong. My address is like my shoes, it travels with me. But I am a citizen of the world, she said as well. From 1900 until she died in 1930, she was one of the most famous women in America, and one that was beloved by workers. Mother Jones believed those who suffered were capable of organizing against their oppression. She wasn't going to be the leader that magically turned up a new strategy. That was even in the case of children. Jones first wrote about child labor, the scourge of child labor, in 1896 when she traveled to Southern textile mills. And she later said that was how she originally acquired the moniker mother. Their employers used a family system of textile labor that exploited children. In fact, she only got a job by promising to bring her own children, which she told the mill owner she would send for. The boss kept waiting for them, and meanwhile, Jones developed intelligence that she reported back to the leading socialist newspaper of the time. By 1903, in the midst of textile strike and mine workers strike, Mother Jones marched with 100 children, some barely 10 years old, from Philadelphia to Wall Street. And this is, an incredible depiction, that map of how far they marched. They wanted to go to Wall Street, to Wall Street in New York, and then they went on to President Theodore Roosevelt's summer home on Long Island. And we are delighted to have Bridget Duffy, a member of Actors Equity and SAG-AFTRA, and a retired teacher who is also on our Mother Jones Statue Committee, to perform Mother Jones' Memories of that March.
In the spring of 1903, I went to Kensington, Pennsylvania, where 75,000 textile workers were striking for better hours. And among these 75,000, there was at least 10,000 little children. And these poor little children would come into the union headquarters every day with their hands cut off, some of them missing fingers or up to the knuckles. It was terrible to look at them. They were all stooped little things, round-shouldered and skinny. Many of them were not even 10 years of age, even though there was supposed to be a law saying that they couldn't go to work until they were 12 years of age. I asked newspapers why they weren't publishing facts about child labor in Pennsylvania. And they said they couldn't because the mine owners had stock in the papers. Well, says I, I've got stock in these little children and I'll arrange a little publicity. We all assembled, a number of the boys and girls, one morning out there in Independence Park. And there we arranged a parade with banners, and we were going to march to the courthouse and hold a meeting. Oh, a great crowd gathered in the city hall. I put the poor little boys with their fingers missing and their hands crushed up on the platform. I held up the mutilated hands and showed them to the crowd and made this statement to the Philadelphia mainstream, telling them out there in their mansions that those mansions were built on the broken bones and quivering hearts and drooping heads of these poor little children, that their little lives meant nicer things for the wealthy, that neither state nor city officials paid any attention to any of these wrongs. They didn't even care about these little children, that they were future citizens of this nation. I called upon the millionaire manufacturers to stop their moral murders. And I cried to the officials hanging out their open windows, someday the workers will take possession of your city hall. And when we do, we will not allow little children to be sacrificed on the altar for profit. The officials quickly closed their windows, just as they had closed their eyes and their hearts. Well, reporters reported my statement about the Philadelphia mansions being built on the quivering bones and poor little broken hearts of these little children. Universities discussed it. Ministers started talking. That was what I wanted. Public attention to the subject of child labor. The matter quieted down for a while, and I decided that we needed to stir it up again. Well, the Liberty Bell was going on a tour of the country. You know, it had been 100 years ago, ringing out the freedom of everybody, and it gave me a great idea. These little children were striking for some of the freedoms that childhood should allow them, and I decided that the children and I would go on a tour. Well, the children carried little knapsacks in which they had a knife and a fork and a tin cup and a plate. One little fella had a drum and the other one had a fife. That was our band. And we carried banners saying, we want more schools and less hospitals. We want time to play. Prosperity is here. Where's ours? I decided to go with the children to see President Roosevelt and ask him to have President and the Congress to pass a law prohibiting the exploitation of children. I thought that President Roosevelt might look at these little mill children and compare them to his own, who was spending a wonderful summer on the seashore at Oyster Bay. I thought, too, out of politeness, that we might call on Mr. Morgan on Wall Street, who owned the mines that these poor children's parents were working in. Well, everywhere we had meetings, showing up with living children, showing the horrors of child labor. As we passed Princeton University in New Jersey, a great crowd gathered. Here, I said, is a textbook on economics. I said, pointing to a little chap, James Ashworth, who was 10 years old and stooped over like an old man from carrying bundles 75 pounds in weight every day of his life. He gets $3 a week, I said, and his sister gets 6. Well, they work in the carpet factories 10 hours a day while the children of the rich get their higher educations. Well, we marched to Hoboken, New Jersey, and on to New York, where they finally let our little band in. And we marched to Wall Street. I showed them Gussie Ragnew, a little girl from which all the childhood had disappeared. Her face was like that of an old woman. Gussie packed stockings in a factory 11 hours a day for a few pennies a day. Well, the next day we went to Coney Island and the children had the time of their lives. They had a time that they had never had in their lives. And after the exhibition of the trained animals, they let me speak to the audience. Well, there was a backdrop to this little stage where they showed a Roman Colosseum with 2 emperors showing thumbs down at the bottom of it. And in front of this were the iron cages of the animals. Well, I had my little children crawl in there, clung to the iron bars while I spoke. We want President Roosevelt to hear the wail of the little children that never had a chance to go to school, but work 11 and 12 hours a day in the textile mills of Pennsylvania. And they never have a chance to go to school. All they do is weave carpets 12 hours a day for the rich and keep you in lace curtains and the clothes on your backs. In Georgia, where the children work 12 hours a day in the cotton mills, they have just passed a law to protect the songbirds. Well, what about the little children with whom all song is gone? I will tell the president that the prosperity he boasts about is the prosperity of the rich, wrung out of the poor and the helpless. The trouble is, nobody cares. I saw our legislators in 1 hour pass 3 bills for relief of the railways. But when we cry out for the children and the children in labor, they do not listen. I asked a man in prison once why he was there, and he said he'd stolen a pair of shoes. Well, I told him, had he stolen a railroad, he would become a United States Senator. We're told that all the little boys have a chance to become president. Well, I'll tell you, these poor, deformed little boys in these iron cages would give up their chance any day for good square meals and a chance to play. We marched down to Oyster Bay, but the president refused to see us, and he wouldn't even answer my letters. But our march had done its work. We had drawn the attention of the nation to the crime of child labor, And while the strikers went back and the children were forced back to work, not long afterwards, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a child labor law that sent thousands of children home from the mills and kept thousands of others from entering the factories until they were the age of 14. So as I've said many times, keep on going. Continue to pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living.
Thanks, Bridget. Mother Jones, one of her favorite slogans or sayings was, struggle and lose, struggle and win, but you must struggle. And I'm aware that, I get asked by children to name specific legislation she helped pass. And I always tell them that's not what she was about. You can't measure it by one bill, even though that bill, we can say, had something to do with Mother Jones' campaign. But it is clear that it is clear that what she wanted to communicate to people was the need for them to think of struggle as the basis for any hope for social change. And I want to leave you with before we come to the video, a comment from the feminist author Maridel Lasser on how she met Mother Jones and how that message from Mother Jones was communicated so eloquently to her. I will show you an image of some context for it. Here are miners in a tent city in the middle of the Colorado Coalfield War, which workers struggled there for almost 2 years to gain a union, to gain the right to freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, the right to have a union. And you can see Mother Jones in the middle of that. Here they are in tent cities because they are removed from the company-owned houses. This was the kind of oppression that she was observing and fighting against. And I just think the physicality of this kind of picture, Mother Jones always had the children of the coal mines around her. The image of struggle with these immigrant workers comes across as a kind of campaign of solidarity, the closeness of the people you can observe, the way they, find hopefulness out of something that is so seemingly difficult to find hope in. The truth is that the miners, after the mine guards and the troops burned the tent city where they were, this tent city here was burned to the ground in Ludlow, they lost that battle. And Mother Jones went around speaking, and in Kansas City is where Maridel Lasser encountered her at the age of 14. Here's Maridel Lasser in 1990 as a very old woman, reflecting on what Mother Jones meant to her and the legacy of Mother Jones. And I don't think there's a more brilliant statement ever written about her. She says, I saw Mother Jones when I was 14 years old. I marched with her down the streets of Fort Scott, Kansas, where she had come with the miners whose wives and children had been shot down by Rockefeller, the owner of the mines, and his minions during the Colorado strike of 1914. It was a solemn tread as they marched, their bodies bent as if the earth still rested on them. My mother was weeping. People stood on the walks along the line of march, some weeping and some ran out to grab their hands and some stood meanly or looked down from the windows. I wept too, seeing bodies bearing the mark of their oppression, of their stolen labor, mourning the dead. I knew I saw a woman of the future, Mother Jones, a kind of being I wanted to be like. She was small but powerful, walking boldly in her black shoes. I had heard how the miners smuggled her by train into Trinidad, Colorado early in the strike. I had heard how the Rockefeller militia had arrested this tiny woman for supporting the workers' struggle. And I knew that Mother Jones was barnstorming the country, speaking boldly against the Goliath for her fallen comrades. She was of and came from the wounds of the people, not as saviors from above or outside. I saw then I wanted to be part of a witness for my people. Mother Jones spoke. I had never heard a woman speak like that, without ego or superiority of thought or education. She summoned the images of our life in silence and struggle and invoked the muscular and impassioned fight and love for each other. She came alive as if touched by her mother flame. She seemed to nourish us, expel our fears, make fun of the so-called losing the strike. You never lose a strike, she said. You frighten the robbers and arm yourselves and your brothers. She made us a family endangered, but powerful. I can't think of another more powerful way for you to see the power of Mother Jones in the present than to present these powerful women in the film that you're about to see, produced by Stephanie Sewell-Fartato and Emily LaBarbera-Twarog of our Mother Jones Heritage Project through the Polk School. We've been doing a segment on the Polk School since for years, and this film is a this film is a gathering of the people who are graduates of that Polk School in the Chicago and Midwest area. I think the film explains itself and talks about the feelings of that legacy of Mother Jones.
Mary Jones, aka Mother Jones, was one of the most powerful women in labor history. She advocated for the working class. Not only did she advocate for men, but for children and women as well. And she treated everyone that she fought for as if they were her own family. Hence her nickname, Mother Jones.
I would say that Mother Jones for me is a reflection of persistent presence. She was a reflection of trust.
In the fight for labor, Mother Jones knew exactly who she was. She wasn't going to let anybody talk her out of her warfare of freeing the minds of the working class.
To me, Mother Jones means courage, strength, fortitude. The loss that she suffered was huge, yet she turned it into a calling for her life.
Mother Jones was a fierce teacher to me. She lost everything, and she had incredible speaking skills.
When I have a problem or a situation that's particularly difficult, I will think on Mother Jones, on what would she do? What would she say?
One of my favorite Mother Jones quotes is, "Sit down and read. Educate yourself for the coming conflicts."
Whatever your fight, don't be ladylike.
If they want to hang me, let them. And on the scaffold, I will be shouting, freedom for the working class.
I will tell the truth wherever I please.
Pray for the dead. Fight like hell for the living.
Her address is like her shoes. It travels with me, and I abide where there is a fight against wrong.
I am not blind to the shortcomings of our own people. And for me, that quote is a reflection of ownership on the mistakes that have been made, but more importantly, the path and the obligation to improve things for the future.
I'm not a humanitarian. I'm a hellraiser. And to me, that's just how I stand right now in my union.
Every time I feel like quitting, no matter what it is I'm doing, I think of Mother Jones, because she didn't give up. She kept going, she kept fighting, and she kept caring. That's what a servant with a servant's heart does.
In my personal life, I see myself in Mother Jones because she advocated for children in the working class. I, as a foster parent, use my voice to stand up and represent children who is in child protective services.
And our fight for fair wages and benefits in our unions, we have to be hellraisers. Mother Jones pretty much reminds me of the late, great Harriet Tubman. Since we're in the Black History Month, Harriet wasn't going to let nobody stay behind. If you wanted to be free, you could be free. Mother Jones had that same mind for workers in the workplace.
She taught me to fight like hell for the living.
When I became an organizer in the labor movement, Mother Jones quickly went from being a historical figure to quite literally one of my mentors.
She was a symbol of strength.
So thank you to Emily and Stephanie and all the women who participated in that great video. I know that we're running a little behind, so I'm going to just share one little clip or show the statue, one version of the statue, and just ask you to help us achieve the statue. Let me tell you, I get calls from young girls who, when they learn about Mother Jones, it changes their perspective on life. Imagine how it will be to have a statue when there's no major statues and no statues of a strong woman like Mother Jones in Chicago. We are delighted that we were given a grant, won a grant from the Irish Consulate, but we need funds for this, and we need to win the hearts and minds of the city of Chicago for a prominent placement. I hope that you'll go on the Mother Jones museum.org/statue to see more about this campaign and to meet our statue designers, Kathleen Farrell and Kathleen Scarborough, endorse and participate in our campaign. Right now, because of the controversy over statues, it's been, we're in a situation where we're going to have to raise a public campaign to win the statue. They are supportive, very supportive, but placement is an issue. So all you have to do is go on the website, sign up, and you can learn more. And if anybody has questions about the statue, I'll take them as part of this. But I will turn it over to Kevin now.
Rosemary, thank you so much for that. It was really, really wonderful. And thanks to Bridget as well. It was wonderful to see Mother Jones brought to life. I think that's one of the things that really comes across both in Rosemary, your presentation, Bridget, your piece, and then also that video. I suppose the immediacy of Mother Jones. It's so wonderful to hear women of today speaking about, a historic figure as somebody who's, a living mentor really for them. As diplomats, what we try and do is find and make a connection. And in a way, as Irish diplomats, we're particularly lucky in what we do because our diaspora that's gone before us, both the diaspora living now and those that went before in previous generations have really done so much of that work. And it's great to see that those connections live on and continue to inspire people. We're moving on to a segment now with Lindsay Hand, an artist who will be known to many of those who know Mother Jones. A little bit of context: we in the consulate have been looking at the consulate space where we work, looking at our walls and what we have on our walls says about who we are and what our values are. At the moment, much of the art and pictures that we have on our walls are very male. They're male writers, artists, and individuals. And we decided really to look at our walls and put up things, both art, poetry, and other pieces that really speak to Ireland's values. And obviously Ireland is not just a place of men, and we're very keen to have representations of women on the walls of the consulate. We're launching a project, it's called If Walls Could Talk, and essentially it says, if our walls could talk, what would they say about us? And really what we want is for the wall, when people come into the consulate and they see something on our wall, be it a portrait or a painting, a piece of art, a poem, we want it really to engage them and to tell them something about Ireland and our values. We are commissioning a number of portraits this year, and will continue to do so in coming years, where we want representations really of the best and the strongest of individuals that have really helped to shape Ireland's relationship with the US, but also and particularly with the Midwest. When it came down to who we should put on our wall first, Mother Jones was the obvious person. We scattered around for an artist who could do justice to Mother Jones and bring her to life, and we're delighted to say that Lindsay Hand has come on board to paint a portrait of Mother Jones for the consulate. Lindsay is a US-based artist, primarily self-taught. She has consistently exhibited her oil paintings in galleries, historical museums, and cultural centres right across the US. In its collaboration with institutions and entities outside of the traditional gallery experience, her research-based work has grown to a very socially engaged practice in exhibition style. Hand's keen interest in the history of the labour wars at the turn of the 20th century has led to bodies of work and singular projects representing the women, particularly Irish and Irish American women, at the forefront of this groundbreaking movement in American history. Lindsay, you're very welcome onto the event. Great to see you.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah, we're really delighted to have you on board painting the portrait. I spoke at the start, I suppose, of the immediacy of Mother Jones to the lives of the women we heard about and to the labour movement here in the States. And that's really one of the things that brought us to your art, is the immediacy and the manner in which you managed to really create that connection with the individuals in your work. I suppose, first question, what sparked your interest in Mother Jones?
I think, well, her immediacy in my life and her relevance in my life at the time, I think, and why she is so important now. I was commissioned by a man who owned the building that I was waiting tables in to do a mural on the Ludlow Massacre. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And it turns out that what Rosemary spoke about that, and in all of this, the posterity, think about the posterity and why did we not know who Mother Jones is, and the labor wars really are so minimally taught in our educational system. And but I started exploring the history of it, and that was sort of the beginning of historical research in my work and connecting with historical institutions. So this project is special to me for so many reasons. And the project stuck with me for several years after doing one simple small mural. And as I decided I wanted to do a larger body of work, and as I dove into the research, you of course meet Mother Jones because she had such a huge, colorful part of that story, like Rosemary read from Meridol Lesueur, and she really rallied the women of Trinidad and Ludlow area to march and speak for the men. I mean, without the women, there would have been no strike either. And I did a painting of the women marching with a sign that says, Mother Jones has not done anything that I would not do. And that their connection to Mother Jones almost spoke to me just as much as Mother Jones. It was like my introduction of needing this woman who was going to lead, who was going to not just pick you up when you're down, but being that person that you want to be. And, you know, and it's being a very optimistic person and hopeful. I think people can kind of, you know, you get those permanent pessimists and kind of look down upon that, but it's like you're just naive or silly, or she has a true grit that takes to have that, to step up and speak. And I wanted that in my life. I like how she spoke for the working class, for all of us. I knew what it was like to have to work 3 jobs to pay bills. I knew all of these things, and I was ready for her to come into my life as sort of that figure, and adopted her in a way. And Rosemary quoted Meridel Lesueur, and I have a small quote here that is in this book. Elliot Gorn wrote a biography, and it's more brief, and I think what Rosemary read was just beautiful and expanded on it. Her quote is, when she was 14 years old and she first heard Mother Jones speak, I felt engendered by the true mother, not the private mother of one family, but the emboldened and blazing defender of all her sons and daughters. So I think that's where it began with Mother Jones, and then in that body of work, and then meeting Rosemary and Kate contacting me about working with the Mother Jones Heritage Project, then another level of women who are passionate about the labor movement and this figure, and they just grew that in my life even more.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's great and amazing just to hear, I suppose, how Mother Jones kind of came into your life. Is really interesting. You mentioned, in the introduction, I mentioned your research-based approach to your work. I suppose, can you talk us a little bit through, how, when you have a commission or you're painting a portrait, how you go about, I suppose, bringing it to life, how you go about, doing your research, what's your approach?
Mm-hmm. I think it varies a little bit of my relationship with the person, with doing the commission with historical figures. I really like going to, what's the word? So with Ludlow, it was kind of as libraries were still digitizing, and I went up to Denver to the History Center, and I was able to hold and touch and feel and look through all these photos, because that was the only way to get at them. And they have since been put online. I mean, it's amazing. You can go look through all of that. And part of me wants to go track down the rest of the Mother Jones photos. I've been lucky enough to have Rosemary in my life, and I'll be like, do you have a picture like this? She has just vast amounts. She has, to have a historian passionate about that, just with all that information at their fingertips, is amazing. I like to read. I like to also explore the time that they lived, not just their direct, interactions, what was going on, not just in her world. And she was about addressing the nation in its entirety. But for example, with Mother Jones and Fanny Sellens, what was going on with those elite crowds in the arts. John Singer Sargent was one of the, was the premier portrait artist of his time, and examining things like that. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely does. I suppose a question. I'm not an artist, as anyone that's seen me try and draw will tell you. So I'm always really interested myself in, I suppose, an artist's relationship to your work. And you mentioned, Mother Jones obviously has had such a huge impact, and anyone that knows her really feels that impact in their lives. It seems, they really, take her to heart, and she becomes a mentor, and they seem to, she really impacts upon people. But at the same time, I suppose, and we even heard from Rosemary that, some of the work that she's done has helped Cork rediscover, Mother Jones and her contribution here in the States into the labour movement. I suppose, what's your approach to painting a subject like this that has had great impact, but in a way is lesser known? I suppose, does that give you a greater freedom in your painting, to paint that person and to do a representation of them, or in a way, does it place a greater burden on you because, there may be less paintings of I imagine if someone's painting Abraham Lincoln, there's, 1,000 paintings of Abraham Lincoln, but does it place a greater burden on you, or does it give a greater freedom? Or is that just a question from somebody who's not an artist and doesn't bear any influence on your work at all?
I'm kidding. No, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about the pressure there. Thank you, Kevin.
Sorry, no pressure.
I think, I'm thinking about that and how I process that, like having done portraits with friends or people I know, patrons, of either their ancestors or them, there's that likeness factor. People do know her face well enough to have the likeness. But I think in every commission I take on, I have to stop and make sure I have this authentic relationship with the subject. First, I think it's kind of one of those, it's a fine line. And I just focus on that and really have to put out of my mind any outside perceptions. Because I think, and what I've observed when people view my art is that they sometimes see it totally different than I will. But there was still the goal was still accomplished. And so if I just speak what my truth is between that and that subject, then it will come across as it needs to. I think.
That's great. You've actually answered my next question, which was, once you've painted something, what's your connection to the art and how others perceive it? Lindsay, we're really excited to see the painting. It's going to be at the 1st of May. We're going to unveil it in the consulate. We had hoped we'd be able to do something in person, but I think just with where we are with COVID, it probably won't be in May, but we'll definitely do something so folks can come and see. We'll have a second unveiling when folks can come and see it. Before I open it to questions from the floor, just I suppose what can we expect to see? What particular aspects of Mother Jones do you really like to imbue in a painting?
The spirit that she has, that really, even through the video and Rosemary talking, like you said, she just, because to know her story, to know her and the power of the empathy she has from her own tragedy, yet it's so transmuted into this beautiful strength. Like to have that spirit throughout it. Spirit, her Irish ancestry there. And I want to say thank you so much. I'm beyond thrilled to have this opportunity.
No, and look, we're beyond thrilled. As I said, this is the first. I think we could have a better person to paint the portrait and person in the portrait. So we're really delighted that your work and Mother Jones will forever be part of the consulate and the consulate's connection to Chicago. So thank you, Lindsay. We've a few questions now here from folks on the event. I'll run through them. They're for I think mostly for Rosemary at first. Rosemary, I suppose one question is, when will the Mother Jones statue be built? Or when? Yes. Well, I suppose, when is the hope?
Well, we hope within the year. That's what I anticipate. Maybe, it all depends on getting the approval of the site, and we are on our way finally. We had a meeting with the city We had put organizing pressure on them in great Mother Jones tradition here. They started getting a lot of letters. So if any of you want to work with us on getting letters, that would be wonderful. But, you know, they finally have a plan. And again, they weren't denying us in particular. They were trying to get a system that had a public facing interface where they could make it an open process before it was kind of murky. And we had gone through all of that and achieved an initial agreement, and then it all went into restart position. So we're restarting from now, but we were assured by the authorities of the Chicago Monuments Committee that they are with us. They, especially after hearing some of the women, one of the women, Deborah Cozy Lane, came to the meeting and said some of the things that she said in that video that you saw. And it was very persuasive, but all of us, Bridget was there, and all of our statue committee came away feeling we're on our way. So now it'll be finishing off the fundraising and getting the exact location.
Wonderful. And Rosemary, we're all behind you here in the consulate in that work as well. We've a few questions just on resources and books. Are there new primary sources since Goran's book in 2001? Can you recommend a biography? Anything like that? And Rosemary, whatever you say, whatever you tell us, we'll pop in, we'll send an email to all the folks that have tuned in today, so we can send that on to you as well. So any recommendations, Rosemary?
Yes, an entry-level book is still the autobiography of Mother Jones. I think somebody else put that in there. It's a short book. It's, as you can see with Bridget's reading, it's dramatic. And then Elliot Goran's book is the signal contribution, going back to Ireland and really having investigated that. So I would say those are two recommendations. We have a video on our website. If you go to About Mother Jones on our website, you can see for free a 24-minute video, really great for students and classrooms and other kinds of education. So you'll see her speaking. So there's also our website, I think, which is full of valuable information. We have a wonderful set of materials there that I think fills out her legacy. Our project is about the memory, but also how she's been kept alive. There are books on, she was everywhere. One of the things on our website is a map, which will it's just a fraction of what she did, where she was, including, we're going to have the anniversary of the Mexican Revolution, including her activities in the Mexican Revolution. So there's just so much that is there, and there is more to come on there. So the Meridel Lasser, there's the preface is in one of the autobiographies, her writings. Clarence Darrow, who was a famous Chicago lawyer, also has a preface in one of the editions. So, there's just a tremendous amount that that can be accessed.
Rosemary, that's great. Thanks so much. And folks, will send those out by email. We've a few comments and questions around Lindsay's work. She's got a wonderful piece in the Irish American Heritage Centre. We have a photo of it somewhere in the consulate, and we will we'll send that on to folks. I'm not actually tweet it out from our account or pop it up on our Instagram. It's really, really wonderful. It just really draws you in. We also have a question around a tattoo that you have of Mother Jones, Lindsay, but it's okay. You don't have to show your tattoo. That's fine. We'll send out some photos of your work. I suppose I'll probably close the event here, but before I do, I just want to thank everybody for your time today, for our panelists, for the preparation that's gone into it. Rosemary, thank you so much. And it's wonderful for us to be able to support the work of the Mother Jones Heritage Project. We're really excited to see the statue of Mother Jones and anything that the consulate can do let us know. Bridget, that was wonderful. I hope we'll get to see you again. Hopefully, when we do the proper in-person launch, we can have Mother Jones in person. So Bridget, we'd love that. And Lindsay, we're really looking forward to seeing the portrait. And I didn't mean to put any pressure on you. We're really excited. We're really excited to see it. In closing, this is not just the end of this event. This is the end of our Month of Women in Irish Design series. And I can't end it without thanking two women in particular, Sarah Keating, our Vice Consul, and Sandra Hamilton, our Public Outreach Officer. Design is all about creating something tangible out of an idea. And I came to Sarah and Sandra with an idea that we would do 4 events in 1 month on very different topics linked together under one theme. And Sarah and Sandra took it and ran with it. I'm so grateful to them for all the work that they've done. It's been really phenomenal. So a big thank you to Sarah and to Sandra and to all of you for joining in. And then to our panelists, Rosemary, Bridget and Lindsay, thank you so much. We'll post this on Twitter or somewhere on social media, one of the social medias, and we'll email out those links. Thank you all for your attention, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you in the consulate, maybe sometime this year if we can make it work, to unveil the portrait. Thank you all. Good night.